Today is December 28th, 2011. We are in San Antonio, Texas. My name is Mike Visconage, V-I-S-C-O-N-A-G-E, and I am interviewing Gene Alexander Badal, who served in the Korean War as a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army, and we're going to be discussing his service experience during the Korean War today. Mr. Badal, just for the benefit of the recording, would you say your name in your own voice, just so that we've got it exactly how you would pronounce it yourself?
Gene A. Badal.
Perfect. So tell me a little bit. We were talking before we started a little bit about. Just tell me about what you were doing. You had mentioned you'd already graduated from college, and you were drafted. So what were you doing? Where were you living? And tell me again about the circumstances of coming into the service.
At that time?
Yes.
I was just going from job to job. My grandparents, who I lived with, well, my brother and I were raised by my grandparents. And my grandfather said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, what do you mean, what am I going to do? He says, what are you going to do for a living? I said, I'm going to graduate from college, and I'm going to, he says, no, he says, I want to know what you're going to do for a living. And I said, what do you mean by that? He says, what, are you going to be a carpenter, a bricklayer, or a plumber? What are you going to do, electrician? That you get the basic. If you learn one of those trades, I will then pay for all of your college. So I went and I learned bricklaying. Mm-hmm. And with that, I was doing some bricklaying work, which was okay. It built me up, just like Churchill. Like Churchill was a bricklayer. And with that, anyway, then it turned out that I went to college, and everything was taken care of. So, see, during the Depression, I was a Depression baby. During the Depression, we had it pretty good compared to other people. My grandparents, they had a very good tailor shop. He was a very good tailor, and he was not short of money. My mother, she was a model for Marshall Fields and Company in Chicago. That's an outstanding department store. And my father, he was a manager of the Medina Country Club, right outside. Well, he was over there 7 days a week, and never home. So she was actually a single mother raising the two boys. So he would come back maybe once every 2 months, something like that, for a day, 2 days. Actually, to see his parents, my grandparents. So they got a divorce, and with that, he said, I could take care of the boys better than she can. So the courts turned us over to my father, who he immediately, when he got the papers, he immediately turned us over to his mother and father, because he went off to Medina Country Club again. And so we were raised by my grandparents.
Okay.
And we made it okay. I was going to say.
Well, when you were drafted, did you receive a draft notice in the mail? How were you notified that you were being drafted?
A couple of ways. The first way was a letter. The second way was in person.
Okay.
Because I didn't answer the first one.
Oh, okay.
I tried fighting and kicking, screaming to try to stay out, but they came in. And then I told you how I went.
Yeah,
in.
tell me that. Tell us that again. So you came into
the very first day we get off the bus, and that particular company, the officers were sitting at a table in a particular office.
And was this at reporting to boot camp or at the induction center? At the boot camp. And that was where?
And that was at Fort Leonard Wood.
Okay.
And the big saying was, if he's from Korea, write to him. If he's in Fort Leonard Wood, pray for him. That's the parents, because it was something else. They just renovated Fort Leonard Wood. It was a cow pasture, and so we had to clean it up.
And do you recall what was the date that you reported into boot camp, or approximately, do you recall, or the month and year?
No, I should have brought that particular. See, I was.
Well, no, in the one clipping you showed me about your graduation from boot camp has a date on it, so we'll just refer back to that from.
Which one was that?
About your being an honor graduate at basic training at Fort Leonard Wood.
Oh.
So if we look at the date on that, it'll at least give us a ballpark. And I want to say that was 1951. I looked at it and wrote the year down, but not the date. Okay. So this would have been April of 1951. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm sorry. So you were telling me, so you reported to boot camp, and there's a table of officers there.
And I went in, and very militaristically, I reported and said, "Sir, Badal reporting as ordered," and came to attention. And then I came to an immediate parade rest, and they looked, and they said, "Have you had military training before, or you are a draftee, aren't you?" And I explained to them I had ROTC, and I was always militarily inclined because I was in the Drum and Bugle Corps, and with that, that's another thing in my life, because I was Sons of the American Legion.
Okay.
And we were national champions. So, yeah, that was another part. I have a lot of parts. And with that, they said, "Oh, what do you know? What do you know about?" They questioned me, and I said, "I know about the M1. I know about the carbine. I know about the 30 caliber machine gun. The 50 caliber, I'm not quite sure about that." And I said, "As far as close order drill, I know about that, and I know about and a few other things." I said I do about, and he says, "Oh, that's great." And they questioned me on certain items to see if I really was talking about. And he says, "Good. How about if you would like to train or actually give a talk about such a thing?" So I would get up, and the very first time I would get up and I talked, and the officers were sitting in the back listening, and they kind of waved. They got a live one. So with that, from then on, I was doing the teaching with this company, and with that, my benefit on that was that in the 16 weeks that you go through basic training, the first 2 or 3 weeks, I guess it was, you're not allowed to go off the base. From the very first weekend, every weekend I was off. They sent me to go home. And so for the 16 weeks, I was, on the weekends, I was going home.
And was that a privilege because they recognized you were a
Yeah,
guy with some
that was
experience
my
and some
payoff.
leadership? Okay.
They paid me off. And with that, which was okay, because I enjoyed it. The wife enjoyed it.
Well, pause there for a second, because I didn't ask you. So you were married already when you were drafted?
I was married 3 times.
Okay.
This is my 3rd time.
Okay.
And the first time, we were engaged for a year. We were boyfriend and girlfriend for 3 years. And then we were married for 3.5 years. But I was overseas most of that time, or different places. So when I came home, I came off the train, the wife met me, and she was pregnant. And I says, oh, I knew my letters were hot, but not that hot. So we got a divorce.
Mm.
She got her abortion. And whatever, her lover gave her an abortion. So anyway, that was that one.
Okay.
Then I waited 6 years, and I went wild for 6 years as a bachelor. That's the only 6 years of my life that I was free. And then I met my second wife. My first wife's name was Kepnick. My second wife's name was Kepke. First wife was blonde, short, well statured. The second wife, same thing, blonde, same. And the first one, our wedding, we had reception, 300 and some people. Second one, we had 300 and some people. And that one lasted 7.5 years until I found out that she was cheating also. And for example, Truman Crawford, he was, not anymore, he was the commander of the official Drum and Bugle Corps out of Washington, Marine, I think it's Marines. And with that, then he was in the Coast Guard or something, so he transferred over because his abilities to organize these musical groups, Drum and Bugle Corps. So she was cheating with him, she was cheating with Cy Laurie, and Cy Laurie was another individual. He was mafia up in Chicago. He was an enforcer for the top mafia family. And if you ever read about how the mafia was sending $2 million to Cuba to pay off so they could bring their casinos in,
Mm-hmm.
well, he was one of the guards on the $2 million situation. And he was an ex-prize fighter. And anyway, that was Cy Laurie. So, and she, after we got divorced, she was probably doing the same thing with the local alderman, because all of a sudden she got promoted. She was his bag lady. By that, see, in Chicago, the politicians know how to be corrupt. They first take care of their people.
Mm-hmm.
See, they have aldermen.
Right.
Do you know about Chicago?
Yeah.
All right, they have their aldermen, 50 aldermen, and each alderman has a ward, and with that, they take care of their people first. Whatever the people have a problem or whatever, they take care of it. Then they go ahead and do their corruption on the side. Well, she was a bag lady for the corruption part. She would go to the businesses and collect the money for the alderman. But and her payoff was he made her a ward superintendent. Unheard of. There was never a woman ward superintendent. She was the first one and only one, and I wonder why. So with that, anyway, that was her experience. But my problem was I was with the city of Chicago by that time.
Mm-hmm.
After all my private engineering, whatever they call it. And I had to answer to her.
Oh,
We were divorced, because she would just sit back and say, I want this alley paved, I want this over here done, and I want that over done in my ward. And I'd have to do it, because she was the superintendent. So that was that situation. I had all kinds of, my life was...
And let me take you back. Forgive me, I distracted you a little bit because I didn't know how being married influenced your time in the service. So let me take you back, though. We'll come back to the post-war, but let me take you back to you were in boot camp and you were able to demonstrate your leadership skills, and then you told me that you were selected to go to officer candidate school.
Yes.
And you also mentioned that you were noted as an honor graduate, and I may be using the wrong terminology, so don't let me put words in your mouth, but talk to me about the honors you received at boot camp and then being sent to officer candidate school.
Well, I received a sterling silver bracelet from the General Sturgis. That's this general here.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked me did I have any suggestions how to improve their training programs? And I didn't want to tell them that, that get more people like me in there to teach, and your officers wouldn't have to teach anymore. They could be officers. So anyway, that was that one.
And how were you informed that you were selected for officer candidate school?
Well, they officially come in and tell me. They tell the commander, the colonel, as to what they were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Select the man, outstanding person in training. Then he goes ahead and asks the different company commanders of their training companies, who was the best man in their company.
Mm-hmm.
And each man came up, well, my company, my officers chose me. And that's where then they said, okay, on a certain day you'll be picked up by the general's car. And I always remember the general come out. He had just had soft-boiled eggs, I'm sure, because he had soft-boiled eggs on his chest. I didn't want to tell him. And all those things. I'm observant. I try to watch and see things, which drives my wife crazy. But anyway, that was that. And prior to going to that, well, actually, I went ahead and I went through all the routines. I told you about the schools I went to.
Mm-hmm.
The intelligence school in Fort Belvoir,
mm-hmm.
engineers.
And that was following officer candidate school, so you were commissioned, and then you went to
Academy
training
school,
at Fort Belvoir.
Then they put me into this other program when I graduated from Officers Candidate School.
Mm-hmm. And where was officer candidate school, Gene? Was that
Fort Riley, Kansas.
in Fort Riley? Do you roughly recall when you finished officer candidate school and when you attended?
I don't have the dates.
Okay.
I don't have the dates.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Smiley. So with that, I don't have those dates. I could probably look them up.
No, that's okay. So you went to officer candidate school, and then you're follow-on trained to become an engineer officer at Fort Belvoir.
I was yes. I was a engineer at Fort Belvoir, officer, second lieutenant. And then when I got finished there, then they sent me to Japan. And I spent, I don't know how many months in Japan as they assigned me as manager of the upper Honshu railroad system. And what happened over there? Let's see. Not too much.
How long total time in Japan were you there?
Months. I was 5 months, 6 months.
Okay. And I know when we talked before I started the recording, you were talking about how then you received notification that you'd be sent forward as a replacement to Korea.
Yes. Then of course you get your report, paperwork comes through, documents come through, mm-hmm. and they say you report to such a landing strip or boat. Actually, I went over by boat rather than plane. Mm-hmm. And do
you recall where you embarked on that? Was it a transport ship? Was it a?
It was the transport ship in out of Seattle, Washington.
That was going from the States to Japan?
Yes.
Transport ship? And then from Japan to Korea, was that by plane or by
No,
ship?
that was by boat.
Mm-hmm. And do you recall when you left Japan for Korea? Do you have a recollection of that approximate date?
Dates I don't know, but I was only over there well, like I said, several months, 5, 6 months, something like that in Japan.
And what time of year was it when you arrived in Korea?
Oh, that was March.
So I'm just thinking back, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you went through boot camp in '51, then officer candidate school, then engineer school, then to Japan, would it have been 52 or 53, do you think?
No, not 53,
So it would have been 52.
So no, it wasn't March, that it was 52, the latter part of 52.
So maybe the late summer or fall of '52? That far into
In the fall of 52.
The fall of '52.
Because then when I went over, because when I got into Korea, assigned to the 2nd Division, that was snow on the ground.
Okay.
So
That makes sense. Well, so take me back a little bit. So you arrive in Korea, and tell me a little bit about how you get linked up with your unit. And again, tell me what unit you were assigned to. And
over there, they had my assignment made up already. So that you go to the 2nd Division, 2nd Combat Infantry, 2nd Combat Engineers. And your major, you might say, if it was college, your major was mines, explosives, because I really liked them. But the negative on that was dealing with mines, going out there in the minefields, and there was a little episode there I want to digress to. There was a lot of fumes, dust, all that came up. With the water fire came in, artillery fire came in on us, and our mines going off. It didn't bother me right then, but my doctors now tell me that what happened was asthma doesn't happen like that. It takes several years, and all of a sudden it'll start. So I got bad lungs because of this business. Tinnitus, I guess they call it. I don't know. But anyway, that's how I got the bad lungs from that. And I had a hard time convincing the VA, Veterans Administration, about how I got the bad lungs.
Service?
In the service, that is. So they finally were convinced, because I have a whole staff of private doctors in Las Vegas. Then I had the VA doctors, and they were fighting each other all the time. Now I said, but I was just trying to convince them. But anyway, when I got over to Korea, this colonel, he said, well, I want you to go out and get the experience.
Was this the commanding officer of the combat engineer?
Yes.
Regiment? Was that a regiment or a battalion? Second combat engineers?
Oh, that was for the division.
Okay.
It's 2nd Combat Engineers, it's battalion.
It's battalion, okay. And he was the commanding
they're
officer?
They're part of the infantry division, 2nd Combat Infantry.
Okay.
So, the colonel, I started to digress there. The colonel, he said, so you know about mines. It says here that you're supposed to know about mines, explosives. He said, I could use a man like you. I said, yeah. So, with that, he assigned me to certain jobs. But the first time he said, you got to go out for experience. I said, what does that mean? And because I didn't know about those things. This was actual combat now. And he says, well, I'm going to have you go out with a patrol. And the Sergeant Deal, that's this sergeant here, Sergeant Deal, he's going to be in charge, and you're going to be like a consultant, and you don't do anything except listen to him. Okay. Second lieutenant listening to the sergeant, that's okay. So with that, we were going out, and the Chinese knew that we were out there. So they sent in some mortar fire on us. Now, this was my first experience with that. They were off from where we were. We were here, and the mortars came in on the side. And they figured, well, okay, now they start moving in on us. And as they moved in, there was sympathetic detonation. The minefields were going up. And I said, oh, boy, one day here, this is it. And so with that, I'm laying there trying to get down as deep as I can into the ground. And all of a sudden it stopped, just short of where I was. And they were just stopped. They didn't do anymore. And we went back. That was my first experience with the combat. And so the colonel, he says, all right, now I want you to take your platoon and train them. I said, they've been here longer than me. I'm going to train them? He says, yes. We didn't hit it off too well, the colonel and I.
Well, so Gene, so you were assigned as a platoon commander,
yes,
right, and responsible for the mines and explosives. Were you replacing another lieutenant that had been killed or wounded?
I'm sure he was.
You didn't.
The guys didn't last too long over there.
Well, and when you joined up with the engineers, did you go to join them in the line, or were they?
They were on line.
They were. So you went up to the forward area and joined them, and they were already engaged.
They were on line. So my first experience was
going out.
The next day was to go out. And geez, this is no fun. So at that, well, anyway, that was that. Then.
And can I pause for a minute there? When you were sent then forward to join the unit at the front, were you issued any additional equipment or special equipment or a
no.
rifle sidearm? What kind of?
Well, I was issued a 45.
Okay.
But that's all.
But
I'm sorry, I had a carbine. I had a carbine and I had a 45, which I didn't care for. I liked the 45, but the carbine was in my way. I'd have to strap it on, and
sure,
it was just a big bother. But then the colonel wanted me to have a carbine. Good old colonel.
How many men were in your platoon?
How many men?
Yes.
It was 52, 51, 52, I don't know, something like that.
Okay. And was the platoon at full strength?
Full strength.
Okay.
That was a full strength platoon. But then we were getting hit, and the engineers, we stayed and slept in a 3-point zone. If you knew about Korea, they had 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4 point. 4 point was combat. 3 point was people who backed up the combat. That's where we were. We were stationed in the 3-point zone, but we'd go up and work in the 4-point zone. And while we were working up there, one of the things that happened to me was we had 2 trenches on this particular hill that we were at 355, Hill 355, Chorwan Valley, C-H-R-O-N, Chor, whatever it is, it's here. Chorwan.
Okay.
I have a neighbor presently in Las Vegas, and she's a South Korean. So I mentioned to her, I said, do you know Chorwan Valley? She says, oh yeah, that's on line. That's a 38th parallel. And yeah, that's where I worked. I worked
what now is near the demilitarized zone then?
I was worked, yeah. So the VA, they have it situated, as far as combat is concerned, they had it in 2 sections. Either you were combat or conflict, they called it, or you were post assignment. That's after the war, after the actual battles. They were guards, and they were watching the lines, and they weren't doing anything. So it was either this or this. Well, since I was this, combat or conflict, I was more eligible for payment from them. So anyway, one of my problems was that we had 2 trenches, a backup trench here's the hill. We had a backup trench here on our side, and then we had a forward trench
Mhm.
on that side, and then we had lookouts. But the Chinese, what they were doing, like terrorists, they would slide into our forward trench and do all kinds of problems with our lookouts, because our lookouts were too far apart, as far as I was concerned. They were like 200 feet, 300 feet apart. They didn't know what this guy was doing. He didn't know what they were doing. And in between, that's when they would slide into. So this, every time I walked the forward trench to check on my people, I would have my 45 out and I'd have it cocked, and I'd be walking along. Well, this Chinese, he slid in front of me. Well, this was not Hollywood. This is, no, I got surprised. Meanwhile, he went ahead, he bashed me in the head. That's what this is. And I had blood all over it. And as I was going down, my arm came up. And since I had it already set, I blew his head. So he didn't make it either.
So he struck you with the butt of his rifle.
Butt of his rifle, and it caused all that problem. That caused me to have a concussion and dizzy spells and headaches. Well, my men, they didn't hear from me for a while, so they did hear the shot. It was a quiet night, so they came looking, see what it was all about. And they found me, and they said, another lieutenant gone, because I had blood all over, So they looked, they said, oh, he's alive. And they said he sent for the closest guy, that was a medic, a company medic.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't our medic, he was one of the infantry medics. So he came in, and in order to stop everything, he just merely took tape, cleaned it off, and then put tape on it. And I didn't go to surgery.
Right.
I just had that. That's why I got this now.
That with a
Otherwise,
nice
I would
scar.
have at least got a small scar. But anyway, that's how I got that, which was no fun either. But then the next thing, we had some humorous. I always used to see. I never talked about my problems in combat, Korea, and I never. When I got married the third time, and that's another story. I never talked. My children were born. I have Debbie, and I had my son. My son is a child psychologist up in Crystal Lake, Illinois, suburb of Chicago. And of course, she married a senior executive marketing director for the Corona Beer Company. So she had it pretty good until she found out he was cheating. So then she's got 3 kids. And so anyway, let's see, I got off track there, but
you were talking about that initially they gave you very
they,
minimal.
I didn't get the
tape on your head, and
so I had a headache and a dizzy spell for all that night, and the part of the next day, as I recall, and then it went away.
mm-hmm.
Dizzy spell went away. But then my dizzy spells came back maybe once every month, once every 2 months, and they only lasted 30 seconds, minute, and it was an accompanying headache. I said, hey, this is nothing. I'm not going to say nothing to anybody. And I did not know about VA. So at this, I got out of the service, and then I was doing my routine, private routine, and once in a while I would get a dizzy spell all of a sudden, mm-hmm. and they were in such situations that they weren't predicated. I couldn't tell that they were going to come on. All of a sudden I'd have it, mm-hmm. and then it would go away. and I couldn't figure it out, but I didn't mind because it didn't last long. That was all right. And I put up some pretty big buildings. I was a general superintendent, private industry. I was selected as a general superintendent for Sears Towers in Chicago, and I did the substructure. That's the bracing, the slurry wall, which was never done before in Chicago. We did the slurry wall, which they do all over now. And I relocated the Quincy Adam Tunnel, train tunnel, over to the side of the place area. So while I was doing that, a report came in to his vice president, who's in charge of me, my group. And they were having troubles at the Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Hospital. It's the largest private hospital in Chicago. They wanted the $210 million contract that was available. And I was working for Diesel out of New York. And they're ruthless. With that, I could explain that after. But Worley, who was my vice president, he asked me, he says, how would you like to go over and be in charge of the whole thing and have to answer to nobody, maybe just to me once in a while, at the Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Hospital? I said, no, thank you. I says, I want to stay here because that's going to be on the records as the general superintendent. It's in the records. So he says, oh. So a couple of days later, he asked me again. The third day, he was on a Friday. He says, Gene, what the hell can I do to get you to go over there? I said, you've been asking me. If you were to tell me, I'd have to go. He says, oh, get your ass over there. And I want you there at Monday morning. And I said, okay, I reported in. So that I had to leave Sears Towers. And I did that Rush Presbyterian, which was also unique because they wanted 3 additional floors put onto their existing hospital without disturbing the hospital. And mechanical floors were on the top. And that supplied all the energy for the rest of the building. I said, how the hell do I do that? Get up without disturbing them. I got to move the entire roof top of mechanicals up. Anyway, we did it. And also, I was pouring concrete 15 stories. Well, they didn't do that in those days. It was a long haul. So they bought 2 pumps from Germany, and then they put the concrete in, and they would shoot it up. Well, when they shot it up, we had just about the entire top, the first floor of the 3 done, concrete, and the inspectors came in, city inspectors. Bad concrete. What happened? He says, it's like Swiss cheese. It's got all little holes all over. What they found out was that as the concrete was pushed up, each time it went past a connection, it would slide off aluminum off of the grip. And that would dissolve once they got up there on top. And that would, every time those little specks dissolved, they would leave a hole.
No.
So anyway, they discovered that they had to take the whole concrete out again and change the type of structure, type of connections. And we did it okay then. It worked out.
Well, hey, so relative to your injury,
yeah.
Did that happen? You had told me also about your experience going out, and I want to take you back through your experience where you had gone out at night and were rigging extra explosives and you had...
Nothing ever bothered me there except when they caught me.
Did the incident in the trench where you were struck with the butt end of the rifle, did that happen before or after?
Before. That was the very first thing that happened.
Okay. So take me back to that then. So you got hit in the head, but they taped you up and you need to do your duties. And so what happened next as you were in Korea doing your service
Well,
there?
okay, then with that, I went through these 3 different things with the colonel: the jacket, the hat, and the guard.
Well, then take me back through the guard thing. You and I talked off tape about the incident where you were out and you were captured by the Chinese.
That's when this happened with with the guard, and with that, the Chinese, these Chinese guys, they caught me. They caught both of us.
But take me back, because you told me, you went through the details with me. I want you to tell me the same details you told me earlier.
Sure.
A man was assigned to you. You guys had been going out at night.
The guy in charge, he recognized that I was an officer. He had my tags, and all that. He says he must have been happy about that. So then he kept slapping me on the back of the head when he didn't think I was responding fast enough for him. Whatever he was saying, I didn't understand Chinese. And so they took me back to this little shack, cabin, whatever it was. It used to be a North Korean home.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a little shack, and then had an attached room to it with a pole in the center. And, excuse me, that's where they used to probably keep an animal. So they had me, my hands were tied to this pole so I couldn't move around. But then I decided that I wanted to get out of there. How do I do it? So I went ahead, and they had a very novice, young Chinese soldier.
Mm-hmm.
He looked like just a kid. I was a kid too, 20-some years old. He looked younger. But anyway, I told him that I wanted to go urinate. But by that, I was just pointing. That's all. Finally, he got the answer, because I didn't know Chinese and he didn't know English. So he went ahead. he cut my wrist loose, and with that. Like I said, majority of the men in this world don't look at another man urinating or whatever. So I counted on that, and he turned his head, and he was looking out against the wall, whatever it was. There was no windows in that room. So with that, I turned around quietly, got a hold of him, and I choked him.
Did you catch him from behind, or?
I caught him in the one hand behind and one hand here. See, if you put like this, they taught us in engineering, intelligence school, like this, you could stop him from. Watch it. You could stop him from saying anything, which I counted on, and I could also stop the carotid
artery.
Mm-hmm. And by doing that and just holding on like that, all of a sudden he can't breathe anymore. So that's why it takes 4.5 minutes average, they said, which seemed like 4.5 hours. But then I took his bayonet and I opened up the shack door. There was another Chinese soldier out there, and he was stripped down to his waist, and he was splashing water onto his face and his body. He was washing, and he certainly wasn't paying attention to what was going on around him. Lucky me. So I went up to him and I got him in the neck. But then when I took it out, he went down, and when he went down, I got on top of him and I started stabbing him in the heart. When I stabbed him in the heart, I must have hit one of those arteries because he was still alive, and blood shot up all over the front of my body. But then after, I don't know how many times I stabbed him, then I realized I'm in trouble. I could be. And so I start running. And I looked up and the sun was coming up, and I saw that it was coming in the east, and I wanted to go straight. So I was able to go south to our lines, and I got through their lines. They didn't seem to have either. It was luck. I got my guardian angel.
Were you able to see or hear any of them as you were making your way back?
No, I didn't see anybody.
How long a distance would you say it was from where you were being held?
Probably a mile.
So you're still being held very close to
because I'm sure they were waiting for people to come down and get me. Mm-hmm. Whoever they have. Interrogate me, whatever, send me to one of their schools. So anyway, that I got through. I was coming up on our side, and I missed the 2nd Division. It was next. I hit the 3rd Division, which was our next door neighbor, and I was coming up. They didn't know who I was. That's all they saw was a guy in a khaki uniform, all blood and everything. I had to convince them by shouting, telling them off, whatever. And they finally recognized me, and they said, "Okay, come on up." So then they saw who I was and everything. And they sent for my driver, 2nd Division. He came over and drove me back. And then the colonel, he questioned me. Good old colonel. He didn't like that because I had lost his backup, his assigned backup. Mm-hmm. So.
And you mentioned to me what happened. What were you doing? What mission were you on when you were captured? And tell me a little bit about
same thing I was always doing at night, working on the mines, moving them around.
These are the minefields in front of our forwardmost trench then? Or?
Yes, the mines in front of our trench, and it led into a path. See, it was like the bowling alley when you entered the valley, Charwan Valley. It was an opening in the road, and they called it the bowling alley because it was straight down. And when it went straight down, they had curved over. When it curved over, that was Chinese. That was their hill. Charwan Valley, our hill. And then we would just, our minefields were here. Well, we were over about here somewhere. We weren't quite into our minefields. And we were here, and then they were sitting here somewhere. Mm-hmm. And they got me. And then with that, I got slapped around, and they sent Corporal Charles Rosenblatt, and off. They stripped him, said him, "You go back, go like that." And he thought he had the world won. He started off, and he didn't make it. So anyway, then they took me. They were laughing, and then they took me to the shack.
How many, Gene, would you say captured you? How many?
Well, I counted 5.
Okay.
I counted 5 people. So then when I was making my escape, I got the 2 of them. So there were still 3 in the house. Mm-hmm. Now one of those 3 was the guy who was slapping me all the time. I was like, why didn't he get out there and I would take care of him? But anyway, I ran like a crazy, and I was scared stiff. I don't think I was ever so scared as I was then, because I knew once they found their people, then that would have been it for me. Yeah. There would be no questioning or nothing else. So I made it back. The colonel interviewed me, Oh, he gave me breakfast. He says, come with me. I'm sure you're hungry. We're going to have breakfast. So he called the chef out, said, stop what you're doing. Make me, for Lieutenant Badal and myself, breakfast. So I had breakfast with the colonel. So with that, the next thing came up. The next thing that came up was that.
And for the sake of those that can't read this while we're talking about it, this is an article that talks about
Chicago,
you being decorated.
Chicago Tribune.
Okay.
See, at that time in Korea, a lot of politics was going on. Mm-hmm. And so they wanted to make sure that the public recognized the fact that certain things were being happened, good things happened, et cetera, et cetera. So the Army would notify the next of kin or whatever it was, and they would also send to the leading newspaper of that particular town or city this information.
So you were awarded the Silver Star for your action
Silver Star
in the
for that, and a promotion to first lieutenant.
Promoted to first lieutenant. Okay.
So then,
and to pause for a minute, again, we were talking a little bit about the timeline earlier, and you had said that it was, we think it was the fall or early winter of 1952.
Right, but by the time this happened,
when was this?
It was starting to get warm again because I have a pretty good sight, and I've been working with those mines for such a long time that when I went back, with this thing, I could see that these were M2A bouncing Bettys, M2A anti-personnel mines. That was mainly used in the minefields. And do you know what they look like? It's a two-stage mine. And the first stage has the 3 needles sticking up, and they're very bright, which is lucky for me. And then when they step on that, they explode this charge. The charge sends a missile up, and it goes up about 2 or 3 feet, explodes. It's more like an anti-personnel because it doesn't always kill. It does injure. When you get a American soldier injured, that takes out maybe 2 or 3 other people. We've got to carry them. We've got to do it. So anyway, the colonel, he called me in this one night, one morning actually, and he says, I want you to go out. There's a patrol, infantry patrol out there. They're lost. They're actually caught down in a minefield. And you know about mines. You go out there and you get these guys out of there. And I said, oh, okay. So I go down there, and that's all he told me. But I found out later he was told a lot of other information about it. Number one, that it was an uncharted minefield. It was put in probably by the British, who we took over from them. And the British either didn't chart it, or they lost the charts, or the charts were taken in all their paperwork when they went out. But there was no charts. So when I got down there, I went to the company headquarters, and I said, well, I'd like to look at your minefields. And I looked through there's no chart. What happened? He said, go look at the battalion. So I went to battalion headquarters. And I went through it, no mines. Well, we told him it was an uncharted minefield. I told your colonel. Oh, you told him. Thank you.
Yeah.
He says, did he tell you that the 3 attempts were made to rescue and all 3 were killed? No, he didn't tell me that either. So I said, what the hell? I got a better chance than any of the other guys. these were not engineers that went out and tried to rescue them. They were their, what the hell they call them? There's a name for the platoon that does that work. I can't think of it right now. But anyway, they were not engineers.
Reconnaissance or scout platoon?
No, no, they're like forestry or I don't know, something like that.
Pioneers, I guess we call them pioneers. But
so anyway, the three of them, they didn't make it. They were either, a couple were shot, another one was, mine went up. So when I entered, the first thing I did, I came in, I found these three guys laying out there. Thank you, Colonel. So I went back, and I went out, I went around the minefield, and I came in from the Chinese side. And with that, I had this roll of tape, and then I would tape out where the clear spot was for the guys to walk back, because there was some uninjured, there were injured, and there was bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So I would, I told the uninjured people to pick up the bodies and bring them out. And I helped on that, because I told these fellas, I says, you're going to see the 3 spikes. Don't touch those 3 spikes. Walk around them. So they were half scared. They were all, because they didn't shoot back because they didn't want the Chinese to find out who they were, where they were. But meanwhile, the Chinese, we were sending up smoke. And we had a regular cloud. The hills were like this, and we had a cloud like his. And so we could work down here. So they sent people down. And those people, I don't know how many there were, but they sent them down, and they were shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Worst shots in the world. Lucky for me, because I could feel, I could hear it coming around, ping, ping, and I said, that's not nice. So with that, I was able to accomplish that our people sent people down, and they were taking care of those guys.
Returning fire on the Chinese, well, to cover you
Fire,
guys while
yeah,
you're
fire,
trying to evacuate.
They killed those guys. And so I made it out anyway. So I got back, and the colonel said, well, see, a lot of people told me it was Congressional Medal of Honor type of situation, especially my brother, who was a historian.
Mm-hmm.
He anyway, he wrote a letter, a couple of letters to congressmen and so forth, stating that I should have received the congressional rather than that. And
so we know from this too that this was March of 1953, based on this statement, right?
right.
Okay.
So with that, since it was done, nobody wanted to change it. So it stayed as a Silver Star rather than...
So was the Silver Star, you had mentioned to me before, was the Silver Star awarded for this action, for evacuating guys out of the minefield? Yeah. You had also mentioned to me that you were awarded the...
Purple Heart for the bash in the head.
Right.
And this Medal of, a Soldier's Medal of Valor, mm-hmm. for killing the 2 guys.
That was for escaping from being captured by the 2 Chinese guys?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure I had it.
The colonel did give me some things. So with that,
And was your promotion, though, you mentioned you were also promoted to first lieutenant.
Yes.
Was that based on the
Yes.
escaping from the 2 Chinese?
No, it was based
That was
on
based
this.
on evacuating
Yeah.
the guys from the minefield. Okay. I want to make sure
So
I
with
had that
this,
straight.
anyway, I tried to contact the colonel. I tried to contact the colonel after I got out, but he would be retired, and the way they have it set up for people like him, you can't make contact with him.
Yeah.
It's unknown. So anyway, my dizzy spells grew worse and worse until now. I have a dizzy spell maybe once or twice a week, but they don't last long, so I don't pay that much attention to it. But for the VA, I had to tell them, they had the neurologist, psychiatrist,
Right.
they had all the pulmonary, they had all these different doctors checking me out. And in fact, the neurologist, she said, prove to me that you were in combat.
There you go.
Well, what am I going to do? I didn't get this going to church. So anyway, she says, well, that's that. On my concussion, because I had this concussion business going on, they couldn't figure out what it was. And they said, we can't figure out. We had MRIs, you know what MRI, MIR or whatever it is. I had those taken, I don't know how many times.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we can't find anything really wrong. You're probably abnormal, but that's normal. So at that, anyway, I had my private doctors come up with the thing, and they said, hey, this man is suffering, and he's suffering from this situation. And finally, the scientific investigators, they came out with this I hope I got it. They came out with they found the solution. Why all these veterans were having these post-traumatic syndrome, PTS.
Yes, PTSD.
I don't know why I didn't keep it. I've got it.
Is this traumatic brain injury type of?
Yeah, they had an article. They
Right.
discovered the secret why these concussions were being occurred. It's way back and tucked away.
Right.
He says that's probably what happened with him. So with that, I took this article and went to show it to my VA neurologist. I went to check, just give it to her. She says, I don't want to see that. I said, whoa, these were doctors, and you're a doctor. And they were, for years, they've been checking this as one thing only, and they finally discovered it. They're not VA.
Right.
I said, you got to be kidding. So I put that in my file, and I changed her real fast. But
well, Gene, did you spend the entire rest of your tour then in Korea with the 2nd Engineers then?
Yeah.
So you spent the rest of your tour there. Do you, were there any other events that stick in your mind before you came home? And,
No.
And talk to me about what happened at the end of your tour. Had the armistice been signed yet? Did you stay? Were you rotated either home or back to Japan? What happened and when?
No, they rotate me back home for discharge. At Fort Sheridan.
And was that based on being the end of your service or because of your injury or
No,
what?
no, that was service.
Okay.
Because they didn't go into my injury.
Okay. Yeah, they didn't think it was anything other than you got hit.
Yeah, they didn't pay attention. So with that.
And were things in general, and I didn't ask this earlier, but I just want to kind of get a broader sense of when you joined 2nd Division, and we've talked about the Chorwan Valley. Were you more or less in that same area the whole time?
The whole
Chorwan
time.
Valley?
The whole time.
Okay. So that's easy because we can pinpoint the Chorwan Valley and we can go in maps and find out where the 2nd Division,
Just ask
what
my
piece of ground
neighbor
they occupied.
upstairs.
Well, we can go to your neighbor.
she's South Korean, and she knew exactly where that Chorwan Valley was.
Well, I'd like to take you through coming home, but before I do that, are there any other things you realizing there are these little things that might stick in your mind about your time in Korea? Any other like funny things or stupid things or goofy things you remember?
My combat conflict with my family.
Mm-hmm.
And my first wife, when she was contacted by the Tribune, first thing they did is they called her, a reporter called her up and said, did you know that your husband did this and this and that? Are you proud of it? She was completely surprised because I never told her anything going on. So then she used that as an excuse. She said, you don't love me anymore. You did all these different things.
You didn't tell me?
So anyway, that was that. It was a lame excuse, but that's what that happened. But I had some funny things that I would talk about.
Mm-hmm.
We had a ROTC lieutenant assigned, Robert Morgan. Second Lieutenant Robert Morgan. He should have worked for the Chinese, because what he did, he had the Morgan, let's see, it was the Morgan mine, it was the Morgan wire, it was the Morgan birds. Those are the three Morgan situations. The first one was, he knew that I was working with the mines. So he came in that night, or that next morning, and he was out on patrol, whatever it was. And he says, hey, Badal, I found a new mine. You got to come out and take a look at it. Yeah, I had to get up, I get dressed, and my driver drives me out there, and then we crawl. We crawl. And here are the three legs sticking up. He says, there it is there, sir. And I looked at him. I could tell what it was before I even got over to it. But I went over to it, I picked it up, turned it over. It was a Korean hibachi. It was their cooking pot with the three legs. I thought, no, thank you, Robert Morgan. So the next was the Robert, well, that was the Robert mine. And then there was the Morgan wire. He was assigned to hook up the concertina wire. And we were charting, I remember I said the road went off like that into the Chinese area. Well, he was supposed to block that off with this concertina wire. You know what concertina wire was.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a couple of trucks, deuce and a half ton trucks loaded with this concertina wire.
Mm-hmm.
So platoon went out there, and about a couple of hours, he came back. You laid all that wire in just 2 hours? Oh yeah, we're done. The next morning, as the morning was getting brighter, the infantry came out and said, what the hell did your guys do over there? There's no wire out here. That figures. So I had to go out there with a major from our battalion, and we looked. What he had done, he took his platoon, broke it in half. One half started this end with the wire, the other half started this end with the wire. He said, when you connect, you're done. You come back. Okay. So, they hooked onto the Chinese wire. And it was a clear Ventura. You know what a Ventura is.
You just come right in.
That's what it was. And it was perfect for them to come on down. And I said, no. So I had to go out there with my platoon and restructure the whole wire situation. That was the Morgan wire. Then there was the Morgan bird. Over in Korea, they had a lot of these, what do you call these? Pheasants. Mm-hmm. And they were always chirping around. And the Chinese always used bugles, whistles, and different call signs. And he was up there with his platoon, and he heard chip. he left his platoon, ran back went past the company headquarters, up to the battalion, and since the engineers were highly, they were respected. And the second, boy, anything we said, it went. So he reported to the battalion and said, "We're being run over. The guys are coming over like crazy, the Chinese." So our artillery came around, our battalion came down, our battalion unit came down, and the tanks were there, they were there, and they called our engineer group out. We always did the blocking, so we had to block off the valley, the bowling alley. And with that, the people up front, when we start bombing our area, our artillery, the infantry says, "Why are you charging? Charging on us?" He says, "Because you're being overrun." I said, "Nothing's happening up here. We're just very peaceful, quiet." Meanwhile, the General Fry, was listening in on all this with the red phone. He says, "What's going on? Who reported that?" They said, "Some lieutenant, what was it? Morgan, Robert Morgan. I will see him tomorrow. Thank you." Boom. That was the last we ever saw of Robert Morgan. He was gone. His place was packed up.
Wow.
So those are the comical parts of what happened over there.
Well, so Gene, tell me about when you got orders to go home. Were you sent home individually, or was the whole unit sent home? And when
when I
was
was
that? Do you recall?
given the orders in August,
So August of 1953.
1953.
Okay.
They went ahead and just give you, everything is done in paperwork.
Right.
So I received the paperwork. So you report to such a this kind of place. Well, my mistake was being the way I was, honest. I turned in my 45, which I shouldn't have done. Everybody else kept theirs. I turned mine in, and I turned my carbine in, and a few other things. And that was clean. I was done. So then I reported to a pier, a boat, and it took us all the way back to Seattle, Washington. There you got a train. Depends on where you're going. Mine was Midwest, Chicago. So then I was on that train for 2 days, I guess. And with that, when I got off the train, my second wife, that's the kept key. No, I'm sorry, the kept Nick. She was pregnant. And I said, my letters were hot, but not that hot. And with that, we got a divorce. So then I waited 6 years as a bachelor. Thank you. I have a guardian angel I always thank. And I was wild for those 6 years. I did everything.
And did you stay in Chicago?
Yes.
Okay.
I was in Chicago all my life, except for the last 14 years.
Okay.
And with that, then I was, I first tried construction, and with that, I had 5 jobs, 5 different companies, and I quit each company because here again, the 110%er, I did extra work, I did all this, They said, "Oh, you're good. We want you to stay with us, but we're going to send you out to Des Moines, Iowa, or we're going to send you over to Michigan." And, no, I want to stay in Chicago. You don't tell somebody who's going to give you a promotion, more money, that you're going to refuse them. So anyway, I wound up quitting that company, the next one. And meanwhile, I had met, during those 6 years, by going to our church, is Assyrian. And we're minorities over in Iran. Assyrians were Christians. All of them were Christians. All the rest are Arabs, Mohammedans, whatever. And with that, the church had a young people's club, young adults, men and women. The idea was Assyrians to meet Assyrians, get married, keep the thing going. Because the Assyrians, they lost their country 600 BC. The Turks and the Kurds got it. So anyway, and the Russians were the ones that saved my grandmother. Because my grandfather, he came to Chicago with my grandmother's brother, Ned B. Deason, and both were tailors. So both of them opened up a shop, and both of them were bachelors for 22 years. They were living it up. So finally, Shiker, my aunt, and that's my grandfather's sister, she said, why don't you send for your wife and your children? You've been here for such a long time. It's about time you sent for her. Meanwhile, she was running away from the Turks and the Kurds. They were trying to escape. And the Russians were the ones that saved them. The Russian soldiers were going along. They saw that she was, along with a couple of other women or whatever. So they took them and they kind of just protected them all the way through until they got to some nice area. So anyway, with this, he sent for her, and my father, the son, and the other son stayed over there. So with that, they came over, and she was loved by everyone. She's very, very well oriented to life. Because the first thing she said when she came, she says, America is my country. I will learn the language and I will learn the money. And so she did both. She learned the money and she learned the English language, which was a detriment to my brother and I, because we lived in a Syrian neighborhood. And all the guys we played with were Assyrians, and we all spoke English when we were playing. But when they went home, they only spoke Assyrian, and they learned the language. When we went home, the only thing we spoke was English, because she wanted to learn English. So she learned it well. Well, we didn't learn.
Well, Gene, so when you came back from the war, did you, realizing you had the unpleasant surprise of your finding out about your wife's infidelity, did you, in general though, how did your adjustment go back into, regular world?
I felt bad.
How did people react to you? Did they ask you about your service? How did you feel about coming back?
With her?
No, with your community, with
People,
your family, other family and community.
No, because people were not oriented to Korea. That's why that article was set up as one of many, many, many public relations situations, hoping that the people would understand that this was not just a conflict, it was a war.
Right.
But was never considered a war by anybody. So with that, that's why they got their trouble today with this North Korea. Hopefully it'll work itself out with the new guy. But I felt really bad. As I recall, I even emotionally, I was feeling bad because I had gone through all this other stress, and to come home and to have this other stress fall on me. And here I was sending all the money I earned.
Right.
In fact, over there, in Korea, an officer received once a month a bottle of liquor. And no charge. to kind
Did not know
of get
that.
the stress off. But see, I've never drunk liquor in my life. I've never smoked in my life, and I've never gambled in my life. And so when they sent me the liquor, when they've given me the liquor, I would sell it. There's always somebody ready to buy it. And I would send that money home. So I remember at the divorce trial, the judge was exasperated. He was really mad at her. So he says, "Oh, what about this money in this bank?" She had already gone in and taken all the money out. So I says, a big shot B. I says, "Give it to her and her lover. I don't want it." And he says, judge looked at me. He says, "Well, okay." So he gave her all that money, several thousand. I don't know, it's 4,000. 4,000 then is like something today. It is worth something. So anyway, that was that, and I had that 6 years, and then McHugh Construction Company out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. They were very big in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but in Chicago, they were contracted by the Mundelein College. It was a Catholic college, and they're on the lakefront there. And with that, they put out an ad that they wanted somebody experienced to supervise. Well, I took a chance, and I didn't have any supervision on buildings, strictly projects. And so I said, yeah, I know bricklaying, I know stonework. I have people I can contact. You need stonemasons, because stonemasons all came out of Indiana. And I said, I can get those for you. So I says, good, you're hired. So I put up that building for them, this Scholastica building. It's for the nuns, 6 stories. And so I had that in my background. Well, meanwhile, that was here at the turn of the outer drive there. The next street over was Loyola Place. I lived in that apartment building, first floor, overlooking the lake, my big window, picture window, very nice. And I could just walk over to the job, back and forth. So I was over there on Sundays, Saturdays, Sundays, checking things out and continuously looking. And I remember one day I was down in the pit, and had a ladder there, and I started to step up on the ladder, and I bent over. Big pain came across my stomach and everything. I said, what the devil's going on? So I went to the doctor. The doctor said, what do you do for a living? And I told him. He says, you got stress. You got, what the hell they call it? Spastic stomach or something like that. And that's prelude to an ulcer. I says, you keep this up, you'll have an ulcer. I said, no, I'm not going to keep it up. He said, well, you got to change your situation. Well, meanwhile, McHugh says, you did such a fine job. We'd like to have you go to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we have they did all the civic buildings. And I said, no, I don't leave Chicago. I was born in Chicago. I'm going to die in Chicago. And that's why I never go back and visit. And with this, I said, I was born in Chicago. I'm going to die in Chicago. I will not leave. And that was like one of the 5 companies that I left.
Sure.
So,
well, do you keep in touch with anyone who you were in the service with? Have you ever gone to a reunion or anything like that?
no.
No. Okay.
Because my life was such that I really didn't have time to contact. And meanwhile, since I was so involved with drum and bugle corps, a lot of all the vets, we joined the Skokie Indians, post 503, or something, 305, 503.
Is this Veterans of Foreign
And
Wars or
Skokie, Illinois.
is this a American Legion or Veterans?
American Legion.
Oh, American Legion. Okay.
And we became national champions 3 times in a row. Miami, Atlantic City, and Los Angeles, California.
Wow.
3 times in a row we became national champions, which was unheard of. No drum corps was able to do that. And
so this was a pastime you were been able to pursue during your
so,
life.
well, that's what I'll tell you about that. The Catholic Church in the Far East, all those eastern states, they came up with the idea of each church, or whatever they call it, each church is to sponsor a drum and bugle corps, whether it's boys and girls, or it's boys, or whatever, because those who joined the drum corps never had a problem. There was no such thing as drugs, or getting arrested, or anything else. And so that's why they came up with that idea. And there was no problem. Just like we had no problem with our drum
Good
corps.
positive activity for young people.
There's so much activity and what you had to learn in that. Drumming, bugling, all that sort of thing. I was a drummer. So with that, the national championship, we won it 3 times in a row, and then it just didn't go after that. The other drum corps started to catch on. They started to get good. So we didn't win the championship after that. So when you don't win after winning so many times, then you kind of...
Yeah.
But there again, we were so busy, and that's what I was alluding to, the fact that we were so busy training, going through practices and everything, that we didn't have time to socialize outside of our group. And if you want to talk about having a gang, we had our own gang, and which came in handy a couple of times. That because I'd be driving along, I was moving one time, and we had some pretty big boys in that group, in our drum corps. And they were behind me because they were helping me move. But I was driving my car, and a car snuck in between the 2 of us, and it had about 2 or 3 guys, something like that, I don't know, 4 guys. And I looked up like that, and they were tailgating me. And I just went like that with the brake and continued. And I looked up, and they gave me the finger. So it's just anything that drives me crazy off the boat. I don't care who they are, how many they are. I jammed the brakes on. I got out of the car.
I know the story.
What?
I know the story. Go ahead. I was there.
Oh, were you there?
Uh-huh.
Anyway, I got out and I took the driver out. I was going to do battle with him. And the other 3 guys jumped out. They were going to jump me. Well, my guys jumped out of their car, and they were much bigger than these guys. They said, stay right where you're at and let them continue.
Great.
So that was that. But it happened twice like that, because I had a short temper. I don't have a short temper anymore.
Oh, no.
No. So at that was it.
Okay.
But those are the highlights, funny parts. But then I went ahead and I went to work for Ludwig Drum Company. Drums.
I recognize that brand. Yeah.
Okay. They're like the Cadillac of the industry at the time. And when the Beatles, I was the assistant advertising manager. And when the Beatles, Mr. Ray, what's his name?
Ringo.
Mental block.
Ringo, the drummer?
Ringo. Yeah, thank you. That's why I keep her around. When Ringo comes in with when they came to America, they were doing all the East Coast. Then they came into the Midwest. Well, my job in the Midwest was to make sure that Ringo had a set of Ludwig drums when they performed. So after a while, I knew how to set his drums up. I knew what kind of sound he wanted on his Zildjian cymbals. And so I never met him though. I just met his drums. But that was that. And then I left them, and I told you about the church. Well, they had the Young People's Club. Well, I met my wife. I met her singing. She did not speak English. She only knew how to say yes and no, especially no. And with that, I saw her. She was very good looking. And with that, she resembled this actress. She knows. Debbie knows. She resembled that actress. And with that, I said, "That's nice." So I asked the interpreter, because I found out she didn't talk English. I asked an interpreter over there, interpret for me. I want to ask her out for a date. So he interpreted. She looked. She said, all right. So I took her out, and I took her to what I liked. I didn't ask her what she liked. I took her to what I liked. And the roller derby. In Chicago, they had the big roller derby there. Well, the night I took her, it burned down. It's the story of my life. And she said, what's going on here? So she said, goodbye. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no. It's about 2 weeks later. I said, I'll try it again. So I went back to church, club, and I had the interpreter tell her, would you like to go out with him again? And she says, she really thought about that. And she says, all right, to him. And he says, yes. I said, good. Again, I took her to what I liked, and not what she liked. Because to me, Iran, people came from Tehran, Iran, were all in shacks and huts. And no, I didn't know they had granite countertops in all their homes. They had beautiful buildings. So anyway, I took her to a drum and bugle corps contest. She did not know what the devil was going on, because she's used to bands, listening to bands at night, lounges and so forth. And she says, no. She says, goodbye. So 9 years later, because meanwhile, I met my second wife, and we were married 7.5 years. And I found out she was goofing around with Truman Crawford, Cy Laurie, and a few others, I guess. So anyway, I went to work. I quit Ludwig, and I went to work for Meisterbrau Brewery Company. Meisterbrau. Okay, I was the public relations manager. And when Meisterbrau discovered light beer, they're the ones that invented the light beer. They had the formula. They eventually sold it to Miller Brothers up in Wisconsin. But it was my job. If you remember, you know Chicago?
Not intimately, no. Been there once or twice.
On Michigan Avenue, Meisterbrau put up $1 million sign, and it showed this light girl with a stein of beer. This is the best, or something like that. And it was all lit up and all that. It was on Michigan Avenue, downtown. But it was my job to take the light girl. Her name was Deidre Daniels, and she was married. She was a good-looking girl. She was married to this, if you knew Star Trek, the original Star Trek, the doctor on their...
McCoy. The character's name, Dr. McCoy.
And she was married to him.
DeForest Kelly was the actor's name, I think.
Okay. But she was married to this guy, and her stage name, or what do you want to call it, was Deidre Daniels. It was my job to take her all over the Midwest and show her off. And show off, of course, Meisterbrau. And that was another humorous thing. We had a Meisterbrow owned a Learjet liner, and I used to travel with them on. They would take me wherever I wanted to go on the plane. Meanwhile, we had a convertible, Cadillac convertible, all dressed up like a light girl insignia, and the driver, the chauffeur, would drive ahead of us and be at that station. When we landed, we'd take off half a day later, and we'd land over there, then make a big show, cameras, all that. She'd get out. Ta-da. So anyway, it was my job to go to a lounge with her, to show her off, and then drinks for everybody, Lawrence Meisterbrow, drinks for everybody, and they hand me a stein, boom, and I never drunk liquor in my life, and I still don't. And I had learned how to put up to my mouth, put it down, and talk and talk and
Right.
talk, and talk and talk and talk, and then finally we say, well, we got to go now, okay, boom, we'd shoot off. And that's how I got through that experiences.
Cool.
But then, what else?
Gene, we're going to go ahead and let's go ahead and I'm going to close this interview just because I
Okay.
know that they've got to use.
Oh, I wanted to show you
Zoom.
something. Here's something you might want to see.
I'm going to see if Debbie will make copies of all of this for me, if that's
Oh,
okay.
okay. Because this is my cousin,
Oh, okay.
ex-POW weightlifter. He was a champion weightlifter. Hubert David.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good
Okay.
job.
I'm going to ask you about that offline, but that concludes this interview.